Hello and welcome to The Cutting Edge, brought to you by Schmidt Brothers Cutlery. I am Chef Krista, so excited to be here today. We are going to make delicious things while using this time to really work on our knife skills. I am assisted today by Samantha. She's going to run our chat. So if you have questions while we're going through this recipe, put them in the chat. She'll answer them or she'll toss them to me. The great thing about this is that we're live. We can talk about maybe some things that you've heard about knives that you want just some questions answered. Our goal here with this series that we're going to run for the next 6 months, every other week, we are going to be building your culinary confidence. And I think this is something that's so near and dear to me. I teach a lot of classes, and a lot of times people, they're just afraid of their own knives, which is silly because this is your best tool in the kitchen. So we're gonna get into it. Today we are going to be making a soup recipe. In the soupiest of soup days, here in Seattle, we're going to make a soup recipe, and the reason we chose this recipe was because it gives you lots of opportunity to cook. I mean, to cook obviously, but lots of opportunity to chop and to understand your knife and why we cut like this and the safest way to use your knife. So let's get started. Our soup today is a cozy winter soup. This is a potato leek soup that we are going to make. Right here, it shouldn't take long. If you're cooking along with me at home, I think you'll have dinner on the table in about an hour or less even. So first things first, a potato leek soup. We're gonna start off by building flavor in our pot with some bacon. So I want you to take your bacon. We have about 8 slices of bacon. First things first, I want to talk about our partners, the Schmidt Brothers knives. These are some gorgeous knives. First things first, what do we need to know about knives? Obviously, they're sharp, but I want you to ask yourself, when was the last time you got your knives sharpened? Because first and foremost, a sharp knife is a safe knife. So as much as people are like, ooh, my knife, wow, we want to make sure it's really sharp. So one way that we do that, I grew up playing ice hockey, so I learned to test my ice hockey blades for sharpness by flipping over the knife and holding the edge up like this, and then running my fingernail down it. And you can see, I'm taking little dings out of my fingernail like this. It's actually catching my fingernail, so it's very sharp. So a sharp knife will have a V, the blade will form a V, whereas a dull knife, that V might have sort of rounded over a little bit, or it's straight up a rocker, and we don't want that. We want a sharp knife. The Schmidt Brothers Cutlery, we know, has amazing construction. This particular set that I'm using today is called the Apollo set. It's this really fun, like dark knife. I sort of feel like a knife Jedi using this. So we're going to be using our knives. First things first, we've checked how sharp it is. It's very sharp. Next, I want to tell you the correct way, and this is the way that I think really is something that maybe if you haven't been holding your knife like this, I'm going to invite you to try holding your knife this way. And it's a pinch grip, right? So you're going to take right where the blade and the handle meet, and you're just going to pinch it with your thumb and forefinger, and then your other 3 fingers are going to wrap around the bottom of the blade. So really, though, the control is right here, and then we wrap. Okay, so I see a lot of people do this, and this is actually really wobbly. You don't need to point at what you're cutting. You need to have full control over the knife by gripping it with a pinch grip right here, okay? So if you're cutting along with me at home, I encourage you to just try this. And I will say this a couple times tonight probably, that it takes practice to be really good with a knife, and it takes a really sharp knife. So I have both practice, a lot of practice of chopping in wild and wonderful places, and I have a really sharp knife. So let's get to it. And again, thanks to the Schmidt Brothers Cutlery for giving us this opportunity. They are really on a mission to sharpen your passion for cooking and grilling. So we're gonna get to it, chop all the things right now, okay? So I've got my bacon. This is gonna be my garnish, but it's also a flavor builder. And we're going to pinch grip and then push down. I'm gonna make this into some little cubes like this. And we're gonna put them into our hot pan. Oh, goody, it's nice and hot. This is going to help us build flavor in this very simple soup. And you'll see that I'm holding, with my other hand, I'm holding what I'm gonna chop. This is not the slippery part just yet, so wait till you see that. But I'm holding this down. We've chopped our bacon. We're gonna put this in a medium heat stock pot, and I'm going to really focus on keeping my cutting board clean. That's the other thing you want to do. Keep your cutting board and your knife clean. We've got that going in there over medium heat, and that's just going to render out some fat and flavor for a minute. I think the other thing to think about when you're cutting is the cutting board setup that you have. So I used to cook on boats and research vessels, so not like yachts. I was cooking for a company that did marine science at sea and traditional sailing on schooners. And so on those boats especially, you want to have a very safe cutting surface. So oftentimes with the stability of the boat changing as we're underway, and I'm cooking for 40 students and scientists, I would anchor my cutting board. You can do it with a wet paper towel. You can do it with like a little bit of a rug mat underneath so that your cutting board is not slipping. And even though we're not out at sea right now, I do really recommend that you put a wet paper towel or you put something under your cutting board so that it stabilizes your cutting board. We're right on top of our cooktop here because it's a nice flat surface. You can do this on a tile counter anywhere you need to. So take advantage of that extra added safety that your cutting board is not moving around. Okay, so that's going away here. Samantha, how are we doing in the chat? Does anyone have a specific question that we can start off with?
Doing great. So far, we're just talking about some options for if you don't want to use bacon.
Okay.
People suggested things like mushrooms and then butter for fat. And also asking about the heat general, and I think you said medium, right?
Yes, medium high, to get this going here, nice and crispy. Great to hear. I love an interactive chat, so keep the questions coming. We're gonna move on to a little bit different part of this recipe. We're kind of zhuzhing up the flavor here. We're gonna do some caramelized lemon in the actual soup itself. So I'm gonna just use half this lemon, and you see I'm cutting downwards, and it's not making a ton of noise. I just cut down, and that's because the knife is so sharp, and I'm so grateful for that. We're gonna make some lemon slices that we're going to dice, and they're gonna go in after our bacon comes out. We'll save the other half of the lemon for later on if we need to bring a little bit more acid to this soup. So I took these into some pieces here, use this opportunity to get that, get any seeds out. So this is, like I said, this recipe is very traditional across many, many cultures. Today, we're putting our own spin on it here at our cooking class. And we're gonna dice this onion into small pieces to just build flavor in what is usually a very, very simple soup.
Somebody was asking about preserved lemon and your thoughts on that.
Oh, I love preserved lemon. I love it, love it, love it. It would need to be rinsed, and I think you could use it at the end just as a straight up garnish. You wouldn't do what I'm about to do, which is to caramelize it a little bit. you wouldn't even need to do that. Preserved lemon is lemon that has been literally preserved in salt, and so it's very salty. You might want to rinse it, and traditionally it is just the peel that's used on a preserved lemon. So the next thing I want to show you and point out is that to protect that sharp edge, which is so important on your knife, don't drag your knife around the cutting board. That is just going to dull that sharp edge. If you must move things with your knife, flip it over and move it with the top side of the knife. I think my favorite suggestion, and this is like everybody should have one of these, is a bench scraper. And this is going to be so efficient to just move your stuff around your cutting board when you need to. So don't use your knife. Get yourself a bench scraper. They come with metal and wood or plastic. They're traditionally used for dough, so like moving bread dough around, but I find so many uses for them. Yes?
One of the people was asking about, if you're going to cook with the rinds, considerations for like picking lemons or cleaning the lemons, so hopefully less pesticides. And then also people were asking about that you were cutting the bacon and the veggies on the same cutting board, and they were curious about that because they had heard that being a bad thing in the past.
Yes. So I tend to use the same cutting board and then wipe it down. Definitely food safety-wise, if you were cutting raw meat, chicken, pork, any of that stuff, use a totally different cutting board. Scrub it with hot water and soap if you need to just keep using that board. But I use a board dedicated just to meat. And in terms of bacon and it being, sort of semi-preserved, I'm okay with giving this cutting board a wipe down. What do you think, Samantha?
Well, and it's also all going into the same pot immediately.
And
so I think a lot of that is like, you don't want to then cut raw meat and then cut your tomatoes for your salad.
Definitely not. Definitely not. No, this is going to be all cooked, and bacon is the meat that I'm least concerned about in terms of, because it's been smoked usually a little bit already. All right. And then here's a fun trick. Here's a fun fact for helping to render your fat. You can give your pan just a little bit of water. Will help render that fat. So we're getting there on this, but not quite yet there. It needs a little bit more.
And Chef Krista, I think you had shared in a different class too that if you have a little more time you're working with, you can start in a cold pan.
Oh yeah, in a different class I shared to start in a cold pan because it will help render out our fat here. All right. In the meantime, let's get back to the chopping because we do have a lot of chopping to do here. And this is where I feel like if you're ready to get serious about your knife skills, you should get a couple pounds of onions and just practice. So again, with your very sharp knife and a cleared off cutting board, with your pinch grip, you're gonna take this onion and in this case, we're gonna make this a dice. It's going to, first things first, a lot of what we cook is round first, so you want to get to a flat surface. So your first cut will be from root to stem in that first cut to get to a flat surface. I'm going to peel off our skin here. And the reason I say like a pound, get a pound of onions and just go to town is because you can always just do all of this practice chopping and then put it into the freezer. And honestly, if you don't know what to make for dinner, you can start by sauteing some onions and inspiration will hit. That has happened. That's truly a great way to start a meal. Just saute some onions.
It's also the best smell.
It's the best smell.
And goes in almost everything.
Yes.
There's a show I watched that they do a lot of cooking challenges.
Yeah.
And they call chopping an onion a thinking onion.
Okay.
Because they're like, doing something that they know is productive while they're trying to figure out what they're going to do next.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So I talked about our pinch grip on the knife itself. I also want to talk about your other hand. So your other hand is one that you want to hold your vegetable with, obviously, but also that you want to protect your fingertips. So a sharp knife is a safe knife, but a sharp knife is still a sharp knife, right? So we're going to make this claw, and I'm just going to remove that little part there. And then this particular technique that maybe I'm introducing it to you, or maybe you've tried it and you're like, nah, that's not how I do this. But it really is an efficient way to change the size of the cuts. And you're going to make 3 cuts. So you're going to make the first one across the top, like this. Then you're going to make the next one from that root to stem, which I just cut off. And then the last one is your dice to see the size of it. And this is a great way because then the root of the onion is keeping everything together so they're not sort of going all over the place. So first things first, I like to actually get down, and using the heel of the palm of my hand, I'm just holding this ever so gently. With a sharp knife, you should be able to do this relatively simply. Just 1 cut, maybe 3 cuts from one side to the other, and you'll see that I am not going all the way to the root because I want it to stay together. So that's going to hold it together while I do my other cuts. Okay, so I did like this with just the palm of my hand, keeping those fingertips up high, and then I go back to my claw, and I'm going to do these cuts from the root. Now, I'm going to go for sort of a medium dice, and we're taking this, but not all the way to the root. And look, it's still together for the most part. We got a couple escapees here. Still together. And then my third and final cut is going to match the size of this one here. So that I'm making little squares. The space between them should be about the same. And then you have a nice uniform cut. Okay, so this, and then waste not, want not. We have to dice this all the way off to the top, right? So now you have relatively uniform cuts. Those are pretty great. And we're going to do the whole onion. So I'm going to move this to the side. My bacon is almost done here. And move this. Yeah?
Chef Krista, people had questions about, choosing what size of knife to use for different tasks or what type of knife.
Great.
And also just kind of dealing with vegetables like sticking to knives.
Yeah.
And I think there was another one, and I'll figure out what
You'll find it again. Sure. So knives are a super personal preference. Schmidt cutlery is available at Walmart, Target, Crate & Barrel. It's available nationally. My biggest suggestion is for you to go to the store and hold the knives. It is personal preference. Standard, sort of required in culinary classes and suggested across the field is an 8-inch chef's knife, but that's up to you. Do you want it a little bit bigger? A 9-inch might be good. It's really, the very standard, though, is an 8 or a 9-inch chef's knife to be able to handle the multitude of sizes. And you can go from there and build your collection from there. So today I'm going to use a paring knife, and I'm going to use a serrated knife as well. There are knives, I think somebody was referencing in the questions, there are knives that have little like divots off the edge of the blade here, and that is supposed to help vegetables not stick to it. Guess what? Vegetables are going to stick to it.
Also, as you keep chopping, they kind of go up on the knife. They'll fall off.
Yeah, they'll fall off.
Yep. I actually like, and some people find it easier to use a bit of a smaller chef's knife because I have really small hands.
Right,
And so
right.
sometimes that feels like a 9-inch chef's knife can feel like too much for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of it is personal preference.
A lot of it is personal
You just kind of
preference.
know once you get it in your hand.
Yes. And there's nothing wrong with having, a couple of different knives, one for you, one for your partner in the kitchen, so that everybody's got their favorite tool. And it really does make a difference. It makes a difference in terms of how sharp it is. So also having a couple of knives, so one can be at the sharpener, or if you're really into it, you can learn to sharpen your own knives. And there are some knife sharpeners available on the market that are great. You can do it at home. But I think it's important to have a couple of different knives to choose from and to have lots of people in your kitchen cooking. I really love when everybody's got a chore to do.
Yeah, there's a reason I have like 5 paring knives, because when somebody asks me if they can do something, I like the answer to be yes.
Yeah, yeah. And getting in the kitchen with the confidence to use a knife is great. All right, these are looking good.
And I just learned something from Paulette from Schmidt Brothers, and
Yeah.
they make a fancy specific knife,
Okay.
kind of like a santoku, that has a special ridged blade, so it helps vegetables not be as sticky.
Love it.
So I'm very
And
interested.
each of our classes is going to feature different knives, so you'll get the chance to see lots of knives in action, including probably that santoku, I think, is a couple weeks from now. So we have our bacon. It's nice and crispy. We're going to set that off to the side. Lovely. And then, depending on how much bacon fat was rendered, you want to leave about a tablespoon or 2 in there. I'm going to take out just a smidgy of it.
Oh, and somebody who was Ruby very kindly bopped up to the top of the question I had lost, which was if frozen chopped onions saute well.
If frozen chopped onions saute well?
Yeah, because you were saying that you should chop a bunch of onions.
For sure. Yes, they do. They do saute just lovely. There are some vegetables that I would not prep, like I wouldn't prep the potatoes and freeze them because they'll oxidize. But I would prep the onions and then garlic. So here goes this is going to be a little splashy here. Here goes my lemon with my helpful bench scraper. And then we're pulling up that fond, which is what all that good browning from the bacon is. We're pulling that up into the little bit of fat that was left in there, and we're going to let that caramelize just a minute while we do our second chop. Another reason to just keep chopping is because being good with a knife is like a building muscle memory. So the more often you do it, the better you're going to get at it. I've seen people do like, hey, you have to chop the onions as like a punishment in the kitchen. But actually, I think that's kind of it's a good thing to practice over and over. So I'll show you again sort of where my hands go and the cuts that we're going to make. I'm going to get down there so I can see where the root is. Using my knife, just a little wiggle to the edge, just like this. This one I'm going to cut a little bit larger, and then our second cut down. This guy's coming apart on me a little bit more than the first one. And like so. Okay? And then Granny wouldn't want you to waste it, so chop it all the way up to the stem. And there we go. All right, so there's our onions. This soup also, I think of this as like sort of an allium soup featuring allium, basically. Alliums are the onion and garlic family. So we've got our onion to build flavor. We've got our bacon in there, and our lemon has caramelized a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add our onion right in with my bench scraper and give that another little toss so that it gets coated in the bacon fat so that it helps pull up that fond, that nice brown flavor. The thing here is, and I'm going to turn this down because we're just going to what's called sweat these vegetables. We're not looking to put a lot of color on them. We are looking to just cook them until they're translucent. Okay, so there's the onion. Everyone knows what onion does for the flavor of your soup.
Lots of chat in the chat right now about how it's illegal to discard bacon grease in the Midwest or their house, you know.
Well,
gotta put it to use.
Gotta put it to use. Also, don't put it down the drain. That's true, like safety-wise, don't put it down the drain. Next, I want to talk about leeks. So leeks are, like, we have beautiful leeks here. They're amazing flavor builder. They're what I would call the more mild-mannered of the onion family. They're just a little bit more delicate in flavor, and they do grow underground. So we want to cut them, and we're going to cut them in half lengthwise first, and then I'm going to give them a good rinse before we dice these guys. Sometimes, look, these are gorgeous. Sometimes you get these and you sort of fan the leaves out like this. You can do this in the sink with the water running over it, and oftentimes you'll get like chunks of dirt will fall out here. But that's not the case. These are beautiful. These are delicious. Okay, so we're gonna let that go in here, and we're going to do another one. The other method you can use when you're holding a vegetable is to make a little tunnel with one hand so that you can make that first cut. So I made my tunnel, and I'm gonna go down the length of the leek. Put your knife off to the side, facing away from you, facing away from curious hands and fingers, right? Okay, so these guys are really nice and clean. We're gonna put them in here. 2 leeks, maybe 3 leeks, because these are the smaller, skinnier ones. And right down there. We're going to only use sort of the light green and white parts. This is where another tip for your future self is I would take your leeks and then do the chopping that we're about to do, and then take these green tops, put them in a Ziploc bag, and put them in your freezer to build a stock for later. So this is a great way to just use all the bits and pieces of your vegetable. So again, we're going to cut this with a rocking motion. I don't know if you've noticed, but you haven't heard any of this in this class because it's not really necessary. We don't need to go super fast and super loud. Like, we appreciate that you're cooking dinner, and we're going to show you that love and appreciation. You don't need to chop loudly so that we hear it. What we are gonna do is in this particular moment, we're going to use this moment to show you how I really like to do sort of a rocking motion with your knife for a really nice cut. Okay, so cut off this end. We don't need that. That can go in the compost bin. And then we're going to just rock the tip of the knife down to the end of the blade here. And we're gonna move with our claw hand, we're gonna move the leek towards the blade like this as we go. And the blade itself, when I cut, it does this naturally sort of, they meet together. So I want you to just see this, and we're gonna go for some nice, even slices like this. They're just gonna fall off my board. I'm gonna go to the light green about there. Okay, so we're gonna do that. And we're gonna take all of our beautiful leeks here and just make those cuts. And this is where it takes practice so that they all end up about the same width, right? And we're gonna add these in with our onions, which I turned down because they were getting a little frisky in there. They're getting happy. They're getting too happy.
And Krista, could you move that bowl just a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Some people were saying it's
They
blocking their view a little bit.
I'm so sorry. Here we go, friends.
Awesome.
Thank you for saying so.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for saying so. Okay, and so again, this is just practice. Your sharp knife is going to help you cut faster, but it's not a contest. It's not a speed contest. I actually personally like to think of the cutting part of food prep as a little bit of a meditation. Like just get into it. You have to focus anyways. There's something to be said about that, like hand and mind connection. So just take some deep breaths. You know, you have to cook dinner anyways. Maybe make it a little bit of a meditation. And it's so pretty. Everything on the board is so pretty.
I just love the color of leeks. They're just this kind of bright, like chartreuse almost. So beautiful. And one of the things I learned recently about why sharper knives are safer is because you don't have to press as hard. So if it slips, you have less force that's going into like cutting yourself, which I thought was super interesting.
That is super interesting. The way I learned it was that if it has that sharp V shape, it's going to go straight down through your vegetable. Whereas if it's starting to dull and curve to the side like that, or be that rocker, like that's when it slips off into your hand. And whoops, we don't want that. So we'll put our leeks into the mix here. It smells amazing in here right now, if I do say so myself. And this is also a great soup for a crowd because you just make a whole big pot of this, and it's very, very hearty. It's really, really delicious. All right. I guess I'll do this last little lonely guy here. Great. Okay.
And Chef Krista, could you maybe talk a little bit more about the stock, using the tops of the leeks, what they might be able to do, in other recipes?
Yeah, so I definitely take the scraps that you can even take the peels from, the onion, from the garlic. You can take the tops of carrots, everything that you would put into a mirepoix, which is sort of the three vegetables that start off of a stock: celery, onion, and carrot. You can take even the bits of that, like the celery leaves, and put that all in a bag. And then even, the seeds from sweet peppers, they can all go into a bag of scraps. And when the bag is full, you put that in a pot, you cover it with water, and you let it simmer for a little bit. And that's your stock. You strain it. You would never know that it was all scraps. It's so good.
It feels like magic. It feels like you're making something out of nothing.
Yeah, it feels like cheating the kitchen, right? Because you're making something out of nothing. Exactly. You're making something out of something that should have gone into maybe the compost.
Yeah, I love the you get the rotisserie chicken from the store.
Yes.
And then do that.
Put that in there with all those vegetables.
Stems of mushrooms are great too.
All right, so our last allium family friend that's going into the pot right now is garlic. So with garlic, this is one where, maybe you're familiar with this method, maybe not. You're going to take the flat side of your knife, and to get the skin off, you're going to put the heel of your hand down, and you're going to smash it. Don't worry, the knives are very strong. Oh, looks like I already got the skin off this one. So we're going to go ahead and take those papery skins off of our garlic. With that smash, you should be able to get it off. I'll do another one. Gently now, gently, right? And then I'll show you. So this may be an old wives' tale, but I was always told that you should take the little green stem out of any garlic because it's hard to digest. Okay, so this is where I would reach for my paring knife and just use that small paring knife to pull out that green stem. Okay? There we go. So take out the little green bits for digestibility. Has anybody else heard of that or do that? It's a little fussy, but I think it's worth it.
I've heard of it, and I'm too lazy, but I'm excited to eat the non-lazy version.
That's good. That's good. So sometimes this just means that it's time to use up all your garlic. Maybe you should be adding more garlic to your soup because this means that it's ready to sprout and grow again. So there we go with that. We took out that, and then you take off that little hard nubby on the top of the garlic, and then we're just going to make a pile of garlic and slice through it. Now, I like to do, back to my chef's knife for this, you can use the paring knife if you'd like, but this is where we're going to just mince this, and mince is just the smallest that you can cut something. I like to cut off all those little chunky parts, right? Okay, so mince is just the smallest that you can cut something. Because the garlic is already so small, I'm not going to try to do my 3 cuts through it the way I did with the onion. No, that's silly. So we're just going to make a pile of it, and we're going to chop it as finely as we can, and we're going to move our knife through this pile. This is called a rough chop, when you just move your knife through a pile of whatever it is you're chopping. That's a rough chop, and it's because we're not trying to go for any particular size. We're just getting this down to a mince, and then I'm going to show you what we're going to do with that mince. We're going to take that mince one extra step. Okay, so making this pile into small, tiny pieces. Now, the reason that we're going to all these great lengths is so that the flavor of the garlic goes out through all of the soup itself. So you don't get a big chunk of garlic soup in there, okay? So here's my mince, and it's definitely a rough chop. There's still some bigger pieces in here. And this is where I like to do this if I'm gonna use my garlic in a raw preparation. I definitely do this because it takes some of the bite out of it. But this is what I call the smash, dice, mash. I'm going to take some salt and pour it over my pile like a generous, right? Chefs are always using much more generous pinches of salt than we do at home, and that's why it tastes so good in a restaurant. They use a lot more salt than we do at home. And so I made this salty pile of garlic, and then I'm going to use my knife in a little bit different way, and I'm really only using the flat part of the knife. I'm not using the blade because I don't want to dull the blade against the salt, but I'm just mashing it. And you're going to end up mashing, so I'm really just pulling it around the, can you see that there? Yes. I'm just pulling it around and mashing that salt in. I'm going to use the back side of my knife blade, and you're releasing the allicin in the garlic, which is what gives it that bite. So if I'm making this for a Caesar salad, I'm going to take a little bit of salt and put it on the pile and take that bite out just a little bit. Okay, so I've made it now into more of a paste with the knife. And someone asked earlier, like, why aren't you cleaning the between the cuts? Well, now I really would clean this because it's going to be super garlicky. Imagine cutting an apple on this afterwards. That's happened at my house. Kids are like, why does my apple taste weird? Oh, whoops. Probably cut it on the same cutting board as the garlic. All right, so there's my paste. And we're going to put this in here. And we're going to chop now our potatoes. I'm going to do another trick, and that is I'm wipe down my board, and I'm going to flip it over. I mean, I have plenty of cutting boards, but I want to keep going on this recipe, so I'm going to flip it over. Just like that. Oh, we have evidence of hot plates on this one. This guy is just sweating away over here. Doesn't sound very appetizing, but it is a gentle form of cooking our leeks. And now we're going to do our potatoes, and then everything's going to simmer away. We're going to talk a little bit more about our knives. So this recipe calls for just 4 Yukon Gold potatoes. We're going to peel them into a compost pot. Keep our knives off to the side here. And just peel them. How are we doing with the questions?
We're just, going deep, talking about garlic presses, thoughts about garlic presses.